Great. Great, thank you.
Apparently we succeeded.
Very helpful. Hello, everyone. I'm going to let some people in from the waiting room. And as I do so, I will welcome everyone. I'm Susan Nash. I'm Director of Innovation, Emerging Science, and Technology at AAPG. And this is our third opportunity to get together and talk about pivoting during the pandemic. And our goal is to talk to different people, get ideas, and align ourselves to actually succeed and prevail during this difficult time, and establish communication, new ideas, and most importantly, actually diversify and launch ourselves in new directions. So today we're going to talk about aligning your business strategy with emerging needs and investment needs. And so what I'm going to do is go through and ask our speakers to introduce themselves really briefly. We have Dr. Larry Davis of Texas A&M Texarkana. We have Amy Henry of Eunike Ventures in Houston, with Matt Bell of Strategic Peace, and David Tonner of DW Well Logging, Diversified Well Logging in Houston. So would you like to start, Larry?
Sure. We introduced planning last week, strategic planning or business planning. And I think one of the key points, I guess some illustrations of where they can go astray. If I was talking to Susan this afternoon, if she gets on a plane flying from Oklahoma City to Dallas, there's a flight plan. And if there happens to be a storm, the pilots have to make some adjustments to go around that storm. Or if you're driving down a highway somewhere and there happens to be an accident, or there's whatever catastrophic situation happens and you can't get through, you can't proceed toward your goal, or you might be able to negotiate an alternative route to get on a service road and go another direction. So the same thing in business. We've been
That's right. Yeah, and why don't we just start with, like, why don't you let people know who you are first, and then we'll go and introduce, and then we'll launch into the...
Oh, this is just introductions?
Yeah, sorry about that.
I thought you already introduced me. My name's Larry Davis. I'm professor of economics and management at Texas A&M University, Texarkana, and my primary teaching area in management is strategic planning. Sorry about that misdirection.
That's okay. No, it was me. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Amy Henry. I'm with Eunike Ventures. We're a hybrid accelerator venture builder, and our alliance partners are Technip FMC, Hess, and Equinor. And my background is with the Royal Dutch Shell, as well as Petronas and Big Four in the energy space. Also with taking technology from R&D and looking at various commercial models.
That's great. Thank you. So Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. Matt Bell, so I'm the co-founder of Strategic Peace. Like Amy, I can trace my roots back to Shell. I spent the first half of my oil and gas career roaming around the world with Shell, doing a lot of production-related stuff, and then ended up in the corporate venture capital group there. So that was really my transition from big business to little business, and left Shell Technology Ventures to join one of our portfolio companies, Geodynamics, which some of you might be familiar with. We ended up growing that pretty successfully and selling it to oil states sometime later. Ended up 3 different CEO roles, one in the manufacturing and equipment space, Geodynamics, one in the software space, which was Icon Science, and one in the reservoir characterization and lab space, which was Premier Oilfield Group, where I know Mr. Tonner from. And so I started last year, actually merged my side gig consulting strategy practice with my wife's strategic marketing practice. And so we focus on entrepreneurs, early stage, growth stage businesses, and business strategy and marketing strategy.
Very nice. That's great. So Dave Tonner, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Susan. Dave Tonner, I'm Chief Executive Officer of Diversified Well Logging. I'm a geoscientist. I've been involved in oilfield services for about 3 decades now, and always interested and excited to see what opportunities lie in our business. And so this is an interesting topic, and I really appreciated, Susan, you inviting me to be part of the panel and listen to tonight's discussion and help wherever I can. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. And you're doing such interesting things. So we'll have a chance to talk about that too. So what a great group. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start a quick presentation, and then I'll ask Dr. Davis to chime in. Okay, so first of all, I just want to give it a little bit of background. I like to think of as like sometime in January, a lot of us were in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We were up here somewhere, probably between esteem, having self-esteem, feeling pretty good about ourselves, well, sometimes, and all the way to basically self-actualization, or kind of getting close to it. And then suddenly the pandemic came, and collectively, as a world, we suddenly found ourselves crunched back down to physiological needs. And it's had a dramatic effect on all of us, because we're now looking at the basic food and shelter, water, and then also basic safety needs. And those are informing what we have to solve and deal with first, before we can even go to anything else. So that's actually translating into massive demand and massive needs. And it's tricky, because yes, we need those things, and those are windows of opportunity, but how long do they last? And what is our reality? And so these are questions to think about as we start looking. And so as you start, we'll talk a little bit about keeping our view reality-based. We know that reopening is going to be uneven. Helping people reopen is a huge opportunity. Supply chains remain broken, will remain broken for a long time. Which ones, where? What are the implications? Where are the pain points? And then this whole idea of the world is flat. It's great. It was great for a long time. You could do just in time. You could do find the cheapest labor. And it was totally, everything's like a movable feast. But it's not flat now, and it won't be flat again for a long time. It'll be, at best, lumpy. So we're seeing a certain amount of protectionism in order to at least allow people to go towards self-sufficiency. We're also going to see a number of collapsed economies. Hopefully, they won't be collapsed too long, but a number of factors are contributing to that, which means that there is going to be a massive amount of opportunity to help. So self-sufficiency now is a goal of many companies. I meant to say countries. So we have that to keep in mind. Now let's go to the next slide, if I can make it advance. Okay, so just to think about it, does your business plan fit today's realities? So again, we mentioned focusing on the activities that are necessary for personal or corporate survival. If you plan to stake 100% in the oil industry, which is probably not the best idea right now, but in the next 18 to 24 months, it's a good idea to at least pivot and have part of your work outside the oil industry. But if you are the ones focusing on the services and the equipment, the reservoir maintenance, things that are absolutely necessary for personal or corporate survival, will be important. And then again, just thinking of the pain points in the broken supply chain, you can't even list all the broken places, and you can't list any of the industries that have been affected, because everything has been affected. But we have to keep a clear mind. So question everything. I feel like we've been pivoted back to like history or philosophy of science, and the writings of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where they're talking about the social construction of reality. And I've been rereading Bruno Latour and Paul Feyerabend. I totally recommend them. But anyway, I won't digress. I easily get distracted. And oops, trying to move the next one. I don't know, I'm having trouble with advancing the slide here. Okay. So just right quickly, does your business plan reflect sustainable growth in the new world? And Dr. Davis, would you like to add some points here? Okay, I'll unmute Dr. Davis. Well,
had to get unmuted there. We have a major catastrophe, you know, dealing with the coronavirus, but there's smaller things in any family situation for individuals, for businesses. There's always something that pops up. Maybe you have a key employee that leaves, or maybe, you know, something, maybe competition changes, or maybe supplier, you know, goes away. There are always small adjustments that have to be made. And in this situation, we've got major major adjustments to be made. And it's been interesting to make observations of how they're reacting. In the retail industry, I know most of you guys are in the oil industry, but outside that, I noticed where, you know, the retailers, JCPenney's about to not survive. They filed for bankruptcy. And I read today that they're going to close about 30 or so of their stores. And so they're apparently not able to make that adjustment, you know, to survive. And yet there are other retail stores like Dillard's in this area that seem to be doing okay. There's another one called Bell's, and they're, you know, going out of business in some areas. So some are able to adjust, some are not able to adjust. And one of the things in a strategic plan is to look at that as a dynamic situation. If we get slapped in the face by something, we need to be able to react to it and maybe move in another direction. And need key personnel with the, you know, competent team to do that. And I guess the, you know, looking at retailers, looking at the restaurants, you know, they couldn't survive when everyone was closed down by dictates of a lot of the governors in the various states, but they were allowed to let people come and pick up their food services. They changed the thing in Texas where traditionally you couldn't walk out of a restaurant with you know, some unsipped bottle of wine in your hand to drive down the road. And now they've made a change where you can go to the restaurants. I saw an advertisement today. You can get a bottle of wine for X number of dollars, or a 6-pack of beer for $10. And where, you know, a few weeks ago they couldn't do that, the state's now allowing them to do that, to get that with their food. And so
yeah, that's interesting. Well, yeah, I'm glad you're mentioning the idea of resilience and flexibility, because you know, one of the things that we're seeing is not just in like survival, but investment, that the key is that we'll have to have resilient systems. And moving quite right along here, I really like what you're saying too about thinking about different scenarios and planning for not just one, but several. So I just I'll share these slides later, but I just wanted to mention, since we'll have our guests will be talking a lot about smart systems and also transportation delivery services, robust networks, machine learning, things, all types of things that we'll be considering in the future. And I won't go into this now because it's no time, but need to move on. But just quickly, one of the core things is, as you were talking about, Larry, that the governors are responding to this notion of like, how can they facilitate success? And how can they start and maintain sustainable businesses in a different environment? So anyway, Larry, would you want to say a few more, have a few more thoughts, and then we'll move to Amy and
Well,
talk.
I guess the key. This is what is it? This is our third Wednesday night session. I've
Yes.
been impressed with the people who have joined and the contributions and comments and the great brainstorming thing. I've picked up ideas that I hadn't thought of, and I think in a company, if you have a good solid team, spend some brainstorming time to look at maybe opportunities to move in new directions. I think I mentioned last week, a friend of mine has a multi-million-dollar business, and they're making fire retardant clothing for firefighters, for welders, and they sell worldwide. That essentially came to a halt. He got a phone call from a company in California with a contract to make the mask, and they got about a $1.5 million contract, so they quickly redirected. And then another thing has come forth, with the collegiate football teams this summer. They're talking about limiting the attendance in the stadiums to about a third of their capacities, and making them wear masks. And the person talking about this, I think it's the Lieutenant Governor of Texas talking about this. He said he's betting they will give away the mask because they will put their logos on there. You'll have a logo, OU logo, or a Texas Longhorn, or an SMU Mustang, or USC Trojan.
I've already seen some vile examples of that in the OSU Cowboys.
Oh yeah. So his friend of mine and I talked, and he's looking at the pursuit of when all this is over to maybe contact some of the major universities, and he said you can buy the material with the logos already on there, and it'll be a matter of cutting and sewing. So that's been about $1 million, $1.5 million windfall that he hadn't anticipated, and now in this brainstorming thing that we are doing and he's doing with other people, there may be a new avenue as he moves forward until the basic business gets reestablished and the supply chain gets reestablished.
Yeah, that's great. Exactly. Well, those are really good points. We'll kind of running a little bit tight on time. I'm going to keep on schedule. So I want to transition to Amy Henry of Eunike Ventures. And do you like to, I'll stop sharing if you want to share any types of slides.
Let's see here. Hopefully this will work. Hold on one second.
Okay, so Amy Henry is with Eunike Ventures, and okay, great. So we need to talk about matching.
Now, I don't know, is that showing up on a full screen or not?
It is. It looks great. You're doing a lot better.
Okay, perfect. So kind of going back to the beginning of this, we are a hybrid accelerator venture builder. And kind of the thrust of our model really starts out with companies in the technology space that have an MVP. And it's really about getting them kind of kicked off with paid field trials and pilots. But we work with the scale up and commercialization and even post-commercialization. So, some of this was for a CERA presentation that Thomas, who's the CEO and co-founder, was going to kind of present. But on this slide, our concern is with our existing startups that we have and that we've been working with, and trying to look at different ways in which, and this is along with our alliance partners who are Sequinor and Technip FMC, is looking at different ways that we can extend the runway, kind of keep the fire alive in the organizations. Because for energy companies, they're also going through a bit of a reduction and then slaughtering and reshifting of priorities. So we worked with our startups. Some have gotten, the PPP loans and have been able to get some supplemental kind of financing to kind of stay alive. Others have had their whole teams where they were on salary. They've all agreed to take a pay cut reduction to kind of extend that time horizon. And for a lot of the companies that we deal with on field trials and pilots, it's the old story of it's better to catch a lot of little fish than a big fish, right? So for some of the tech, if normally, it would be maybe let's say $300,000 field trial, right? It's much better we're looking at different ways in which we can test different applications of that technology in smaller chunks. And then looking at, can we do bench testing of that technology? in a collaborative basis, without kind of killing the efforts and momentum. So we see a lot of collaboration that's going to have to happen with startups. We've already seen a bunch kind of drop off. So our big concern really is the amount of startups that are going to be dropping off during this time period, right? Especially in the digital space, which was already kind of over flooded here. So I'll go to the next slide. This is kind of from our perspective, how we look at companies and do the pairing up of technology and with our alliance partners and companies outside of our alliance. So kind of the big challenges that we have is about keeping the fire alive. How do we extend that runway? And we've got massive challenges kind of along the value chain, as well as, you know, your SCM or your procurement processes as well. And for some, we work with the companies individually as well to help them as our organizations, our operators, as they're reshifting priorities and relooking at things. So, you know, what the companies look for is broad, very, very broad. We've got a very wide remit from really, you know, upstream, downstream, you know, clean tech, energy transition. The companies aren't dropping, you know, the longer term targets of, you know, 10 years out for the energy transition, but they're not going to make, you know, any investment decisions, right? So for those companies and people who had VC funding are finding out that it's been kind of impossible for them to get an add-on VC funding. The corporate VCs are kind of pulling back on investments at this particular time. They're still scanning and scouting, but it's, you know, I'll keep my eye on it, learn a bit more, but I'm not going to take any concrete action right now. So really for people that are in the startup and technology community, it really is all about field trials and pilots. So how do we do this? At Eunike is we look at for novel ideas. Are they kind of game changers? You know, has this technology been invented yet? Do you have an MVP? We focus heavily on operational metrics. You know, is it going to be moving the needle? So for a lot of the energy companies, the focus is going to be on operations. We're going to see a heavy focus on digital efficiency, especially drilling and completions. Even though those activities have curtailed, they're still looking at those activities for uplift from when they go back up again. And we probably weight about 60–70% to the competency of the team and their experiences, and are they coachable? And are they willing to pivot? So there's a lot of quantitative and qualitative factors that go into it. You know, kind of why is this important? There's so many surveys out there, but really, you know, I just pulled CB Insights on this. The top one is that there's no market need. This is why they fell. Mm-hmm. So we see this time and time again. Like 42% they say are failing because they're developing a solution when there really is no marketing. You're not solving my problem. And I think this is going to be even more important now with the economic downturn and COVID and everything else, because they are going to have to be even more highly selective about, you know, it's almost like a capital ranking and capital allocation exercise. You know, you need to get to that top of that list of theirs. Doesn't mean that they're not addressing the problem. It's just you're not that important issue of the day for them. So, you know, I just am giving an example of the things that we look at from a more quantitative standpoint. When we look at companies, do we think that they have are they solving a problem? And then how do they fit with our alliance members? You know, the biggest one this year is going to be value proposition. It really is. And the scalability. Those two really go hand in hand. We see a lot of good technologies, but, you know, the ability to scale up on a broader application is not there yet. And so we're spending a lot of our time pairing complementary technologies. So maybe a hardware and a digital company, where as a standalone, they may not necessarily move that needle far enough, but combined together, they can have a much more readily seen impact. So, I mean, these are kind of the areas that we look at, but then, you know, this is a sample. We always remind people, we also then look at how are our companies appraising their performance, what KPI metrics have they developed, what are they targeting for the year? So technology companies need to understand, each company is very, very different. And so they really need to grasp that understanding of what is important this year in terms of their metrics. I'm going to share these slides because I think it's really, you know, some of these are really, really important slides, but
Oh, good,
you know,
thank you.
our biggest issue really, you know, if we look at technology, is the adoption process. That is what we consider really truly the value of death. So it's really, and this is why we're taking the pilots at a smaller scale pilot and how to do them at a much more accelerated rate, right? And then consolidating technologies. And this is where it gets to really the soft issues, is understanding the psyche of the decision makers, right? I think in a later slide I mentioned, it was a new article with Harvard Business Review, where they surveyed some top leaders when it came to digital technology, and the spending that was done, and actually whether it actually made improvements to the organization, which is, you need to understand your decision makers, understand, you know, what are the other groups in the organization you're going to have to work with, because that goes to the management and change. So I may be going in and working, let's say, in the drilling, you know, drilling section of the company. Maybe I'm working on drilling superintendent. But some of those management and change or displacement that you would be making with your technology are going to affect other areas and functions and processes and systems, right? So it's much broader than just your technology. Oh, there's my thing on the latest Harvard Business Review, where, you know, companies are spending about $40 billion when it comes to data analytics, and they keep on kind of increasing that spend, just, you know, in hopes of gaining those efficiency uplifts. But still, we just had a conversation again today with a large oil and gas company on their data technology efforts. And they said it wasn't a matter of technology. It was, you know, they could find a technology that solved the adoption by the organization and the culture issues. That would be wonderful. So it's kind of a reminder, as looking at your technology off to the right, you know, it goes into what are the risks, you know, what are the attitudes of the people of your organization, you know, understanding, you know, how have they been downsized, dramatically downsized, you know, leadership change. All of these companies that we work with and more, they've all had reorganizations already, or they're completing reorganizations. So you're having a massive shift in strategy, management teams, and shifting priorities. So that's where, you know, people also need to just don't think domestically, think internationally. How do I create JVs? There are a lot of also NOCs right now that are also looking to pick up assets as well during this downturn. And along with that, you know, we've been, you know, people have reached out to us as, you know, what are the new technologies from North America's side that we could use as we pick up and expand our asset base. So, you know, just because things are necessarily, you might see them as bleak here, you need to kind of broaden that horizon. And additionally, we work with a lot of trade organizations, with Canada, Israel, Norway. You know, all of those companies, you know, are increasing their efforts now. So we have a big ramp up in activity from those organizations. And so, you know, places like Canada, they offer a lot of funding for startups and people that start up in Canada as well. So, you know, just because things may be limited here, just kind of keep your horizon open, right, on this. And for us, you know, our big challenge is how do we keep kind of the fire alive in these organizations, so that they don't completely drop their technology and innovation groups and teams. So, you know, we work with them on how to come up with measurable metrics to demonstrate the value that they're bringing back to the business on their technology and innovation measures, which some of them may not have right now. And then finding different ways in which we can work with startups that are a bit kind of non-traditional. And I think that's all I had, but I just, you know, it's kind of a throw of everything, but it's not an easy equation. There, I would say, you know, non-technical risk on the whole part probably outweigh technical risk at the end of the day. I would say maybe it's 60-40 when we look at technology. And it's really a lot of the subjective type qualitative indicators are becoming more and more important. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But
oh, absolutely. This was really valuable, and wow, what incredibly informative slides. And I'm glad that you're going to to share them, because that will be wonderful.
Yeah, and so we'll put them out there and then people can just have a look at them. And
Good.
we're trying to do more webinars. So tomorrow we have a webinar with Israeli Trade and Energy Organization with a lot of, and it's a public one, but it's being hosted mainly for their Israeli startups. So we have a lot of Israeli tech that is kind of looking for a testing ground here in the US as well. So.
Oh, nice. Cool. Well, that's really good to know. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, that's wonderful. We'll transition now to Matt Bell of Strategic Peace. Would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Let me
Great.
pull up the right sharing here. Can you see me now?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity again. Thanks to the AAPG and TGS for putting this thing together. I think, you know, to echo what Larry said earlier on, I think just getting a group of, I think we've got about 40 people on the line here together to chat around some of these subjects is really probably the biggest key to success we've all got right now, which is none of us know the answers. None of us have been here before. So a lot of collaboration and a lot of discussion. And then, as Larry said, steal some of those great ideas and go implement them. So I want to talk a little bit about resiliency. This could easily be a week-long discussion. I think building a resilient business is a lifetime of work. So this is obviously the triple distilled version for 10 minutes. And there's a lot more. I'll put up a link on the end to a blog post we wrote about it, which is a couple of pages, but it's a little bit more detail on some of this stuff. So bearing in mind that Strategic Peace works with the very early stage businesses, so entrepreneurs, startups, we go, I would say, you know, the largest businesses we're working with are a couple of hundred people, but generally companies that are in the seed stage, venture capital stage, pre-private equity. So the big investors haven't come in yet. So that's kind of the companies that we're working with the most closely. So let's talk about resiliency. I thought, you know, resiliency is a word that's been bounced around a heck of a lot over the last couple of months. And we talked about supply chain resiliency, and it's, you know, the exposures of some very non-resilient or unresilient things. So I pulled up this definition, and I think it's interesting to look at. So the dictionary, this is dictionary.com. You can go to, I'm sure Merriam-Webster or somewhere else will have a few more definitions, but this one's had two variations. One is the living thing, the animate object, a person or an animal, and whether that creature can withstand and bounce back when it's subjected to difficult conditions. And I think we've all been subjected to that. And the question is, are we withstanding it, and when, if and when are we going to recover? Then there's the inanimate object, the sort of physical object definition, which is you duress this thing and you stretch it and it'll spring back into its shape after you've messed with it. So then the question is, if I say business, which is it? Is a business an animate thing that acts like a person or an animal, or is it an inanimate thing and it gets treated a bit more like a substance? And I'm not really sure that it's either. So right now I'm looking at my business, I'm looking at other people's businesses, and I say, well, are we withstanding everything that's being thrown at us? No, we're clearly suffering. So we're not resilient in that direction. Are we going to be able to recover quickly? Well, what does that even mean? You know, recovery to what? And what is quickly? Right now, you know, I think a couple of months ago, we all hoped that this thing would last a couple of months. And whether you're talking about the oil downturn or the COVID virus, it's clear that neither of them is a couple of months. This could be a couple of years, it could be more. So recovering quickly enough for what? And then springing back into shape, I hope we've all moved past the point of going back to where we were. The new, and it's not new normal, I don't like that expression, but the new reality is not going to be the old reality. And so whatever shape we spring into needs to be different if we're going to be effective. So I'll throw a different definition on there. And, you know, this hasn't been particularly well tested or refined. It's not professorial, but I think the resiliency of a business has got a lot to do with its ability to figure out what's going on, adapt to that new reality, remain viable, obviously, and remain relevant, because it's all very well just sort of surviving, but if you're not relevant, ultimately you're just a slow death. And JCPenney that Larry mentioned earlier on is probably a poster child example of a storefront that's been in slow death for a decade and should probably have gone away a long time ago. And I used operating environment here. So there's a sudden change in the operating environment. How do we assess that? How do we adapt to that? And then do whatever we need to do to remain viable. And so I'm going to give you 8 prompts. They're really a set of questions. And I think you mentioned it in the introduction. You know, it's not necessarily that this is a one-time deal. Businesses need to be assessing themselves all the time. You can revisit your strategy every week if you wanted to, you just don't have time to run the business. And so a crisis gives us a prompt to take a good look at our business. In reality, we would say to our customers, we're big fans of the traction, entrepreneurial operating system way of running businesses. So about every 90 days is the right time to come back together and see where you are. But anyway, so here, like I said, is the highly distilled version of a resilient business. I think the first question, whenever we take on a new client, we go through the foundations of the business. You know, why are you in business? What is your purpose? And if you can't define that, you probably don't belong in business. So when something comes along, this change in operating conditions, the first question I would ask is, are you still committed to the purpose that caused you to start that business or join that business in the first place? If you are, great, carry on. If you've drifted a bit and your purpose is now a little bit more over here and a little bit less over there, well, then pivot towards that purpose if you can. And if you've really lost touch with it altogether, and I don't know why I'm in this business anymore, I don't believe in it, get the heck out of there, step back and reformulate. Because one thing is for sure, if you aren't a purpose-driven business now, in a time like this, you're probably not going to be resilient. You're not likely to succeed. So purpose is kind of that underlying thing, that fuel, that star that keeps us going and it gets us out of bed in the morning. The next thing then is, what's the vision for the business? And it surprises me, you know, vision, I think, got a bad name. You know, people would put up vision statements and put them on a poster in the lobby of the, you know, of the office building, and it was all a little bit of lip service. But it's surprising how many companies don't have a well-articulated vision, and I think it is worth spending time on. So if the vision that's been articulated for your business is no longer relevant, then it needs to be either recalibrated, which probably means, well, we thought we were going to get there in 3 years, but because of this situation, it's now going to be 4 or 5. Or potentially even reformulated. You know, we're going in a different direction. We're heading for a different destination. Whichever of those pathways you go down, recommunicate it. You have to be reminding your stakeholders, that's your employees, that's your leadership, that's your customers, it's the other people out there looking at you, where you're going or why you're going there. And that's what keeps people motivated to work for you and work for your business. And so resiliency, vision is an integral part of being resilient. Need was just talked about. If a business doesn't have a need, it's not a business, right? You've got to be solving something for somebody, whether it's a product or a service. What is that need that your business fundamentally addresses, or your business unit if you're part of something bigger? And the question I would ask right now is, has that need got greater? Has it stayed about the same? Has it gone down? If the need has increased, double down on it. Make it really, really clear that you're in the market. Go reach out to those customers. If they've got a greater need for what you're offering, now is the time to really be engaging with them. If the need's gone up a little bit or down a little bit, that's a bit wishy-washy. And I think Amy mentioned, if you're not setting their hair on fire, if you're not something that's really important to your customers, they're going to set you aside. They've got bigger fish to fry. I'm mixing all sorts of metaphors here, but you know, you want to be high up on their list. So look for, you know, what is a subset of need? What is a subset of my customers for whom it really is still important, and go after them right now, because they're not as distracted as everybody else. Of course, if the need has gone away or the need has gone down, now you've got to rethink your business model, because that's a sign that what you were chasing after isn't important anymore, and you've fallen off the list of good things that Amy just shared. And related to that is the customer. So what's happened to your customer? What's happened to your ideal customer? How have they been affected? If they are in the same places, they're engaging with you on the same channels, they're buying in the same manner, so you're one of the lucky ones for whom that hasn't all been disrupted, then reinforce that relationship. We're still here for you. We're still supplying you. We're not going anywhere. We're still in business. And so they know to deal with you. On the other hand, a lot of businesses, many of our clients, ourselves included, we've moved from at least a partially analog world where we do business in person. It's networking, it's trade shows, it's other kinds of events. Those have gone away, at least for now. And we've moved into the digital world. So if your customers have moved into the digital world and started evaluating, searching for, evaluating, buying your kind of product or solution online instead of at those, you've got to go meet them there. Go meet your customers on those new channels. And if your customers have gone away, like they have completely quit. So the oil and gas industry has just fallen off the world, off the surface of the earth. They're not buying from me anymore. Go find a new audience. That need hopefully can be met in another industry. And Susan, you talked about companies trying to diversify beyond just the traditional oil and gas industry and make themselves relevant to other pieces. That's about building a new audience. And I will say that does not happen overnight. We've had several companies come to us and say, we want to digital. We want to go digital. We want to be, we want to go online and we're going to do everything there. Please help us market to that audience. And the question is, which audience? You haven't spent any time engaging anybody online. You don't have an audience. So you need to start content marketing. You need to start pushing yourself out there. And that takes time. And we would typically say 6 to 9 months. I think it can be accelerated right now because everybody's online. The problem is the internet looks like a Houston highway at 5 o'clock in rush hour. It's very crowded. It's very noisy. There's a lot of bad actors out there, and you just can't differentiate yourself. So, it's very difficult. And so digital is not easy and it's not fast. But if that's where you need to meet your customers, then that's where you've got to be. Assumptions. So every business plan and business model is based on a series of assumptions. You should know what they are. And if you do know what they are, hopefully you do, then go out and reconfirm them. And again, if you're one of the lucky ones, you'll check them off and you'll go, yeah, we think our assumptions are still valid. Carry on. If there are some minor changes or there's an assumption that seems a bit iffy or it's changed, what's the impact of that? Does it really derail the business, or is it something that you can work around or at least adapt for? And of course, if multiple assumptions are no longer valid, or if any of them have changed dramatically, then it's back to the drawing board, back to the business model. Get the business model canvas out. Really think about how your business functions, and if there's a way to stitch it back together. Resources. This one's a painful one for a lot of people. I mean, almost everybody we know is laying off people, but it can be physical resources as well. They're relinquishing equipment, they're relinquishing vehicles, they're other resources as well. And the question to ask, of course, is which of these resources are we going to need as we move forward? I would think eliminating excess is already, we're past that stage. We're now into the painful prioritization stage where it's a case of, okay, I have a choice to make. Do I really need A or do I really need B? I can't have both. And making those painful choices. I think the hardest ones are when the future looks sufficiently different from the past. And that might be, for example, letting go of one of the original founding team or an early hire who had great skills to get the business where it is, in favor of keeping a more recent hire who has skills to take it where it needs to go. And we've seen some companies that are facing some of those really difficult choices that some of the stalwarts of the company have to make way for the future stars. And so those are those hard future focused choices about resources. I think an under-discussed topic is how do you get good advice? Where do you turn, especially in a time like this, and these virtual sessions with people that we've never met are as good a place as any, right? To get free, unsolicited advice. But as a business leader, where do you go to get the advice that you need to help you remain resilient? Hopefully you have trusted advisors. Hopefully you've got an advisory board or at least some people that mentor you or that you turn to. If you haven't, my next recommendation is look for people that are good at listening. It's tempting to look for people with the answers. Unfortunately, there aren't very many people with the answers right now. So good listeners can help you think things through and be a sounding board. And then beyond that, this is the time to use that network we've all been told to build ever since we graduated from college, and reach out to the network, and in particular, reach out to them for referrals and say, hey, I'm looking for someone to help me think this through. Who do you think would be a good advisor to me? And my network has been tremendously helpful over the last year, building the business of strategic peace, but certainly in the last couple of months. And then the last one, not surprisingly, this really has to be on the list, of course, is cash. Do we have enough cash to survive? I think a startup in the past could have probably said if they've got 3 or 4 months runway, they're still okay. Right now, there's no way. I think you have to have at least 6 months, and this is your cash divided by whatever you're forecasting your burn rate's going to be for the next 6 months. It is possible to raise money. It's possible to raise it, but it's slow. Investors are taking their time. They're doing very thorough due diligence. And I think it's possible to raise it in smaller amounts. So if you were thinking you could go out to the market and raise $3 million, go out there and try raising 500,000 to give yourself some runway and play through this situation, because raising big chunks of change, going to the venture capitalists right now is fraught with disappointment. So, and then unfortunately, and we've been working with at least one business that's in this bucket, which is even if we cut costs, even if we try to manage our way through this, we're not able to raise the money we need. This business is eventually going to run out of cash, and we don't see a way around it. Well, then it's time to look at exit options. Just as they say it's easier to raise money when you don't need it and very hard when you do, I think the same is true with exit. If you try to, you're down to your last dime and you try to sell the business to somebody, they're not going to give you much for it. But if it's apparent that that cliff is approaching, then it's the time to look, who do I merge with? Merging for scale, but also merging for survival. Where would this business fit? Much as all entrepreneurs would hate to sell their baby, and especially prematurely, but it's the right answer for some businesses right now. So that's it, just 4 slides here. Like I said at the beginning, I think a good definition for resiliency right now is being able to assess your situation and adapt to it, remain viable, remain relevant. Evaluate those 8 keys that I just talked about, but the important thing is to act on them, right? Whatever answers you come up with, do something with it. Don't sit and wait for this storm to pass. It's not going to. And that temptation to sort of hunker down and then clean up the mess afterwards is not the way to go. We've got to take action on our businesses and begin to reformulate them quickly. That's the bit.ly link. Unfortunately, I didn't do the clever thing and make a memorable bit.ly link. So if that's not jotted down fast enough, I'll share these slides as well, Susan, so you can share that with the group.
Oh, good. That's great, because this too is very valuable and just very intense and compressed, and it's wonderful. I mean, it flows well, and I just love the way that they're accessible, and yet there's so much depth too, so it can be revisited many times.
I want to reinforce something that Matt said. He was talking about resources, pretty critical. I mean, the various categories of resources, in particular human resources. Sometimes you have weak links in there that can make a company fail. One of the big problems is family-owned businesses, and maybe have a brother-in-law who came in and we can't find any place else to put him. So, well, let's make him our public relations officer. Let's make him our accountant. When you get those weak links in there, that's going to be detrimental to the business. And sometime in the normal hiring process, maybe it's not a family-owned business. Sometimes we hire the wrong person, and you got to have the willingness, sometimes to cut them loose. If you got that weak link in there, it's not going to be successful. It'll pull down some of the other team down. So reinforcing Matt's comments, especially human resources are critical for the success of the business, especially in times that we're facing now, and need some versatility, and need some brainstorming, and need some new ideas.
Really good point. Yeah, that's true. I'm really glad that you brought that up, and that's a really good segue to our next speaker. So Dave Tonner is here, and he's going to share some. Or did you bring slides to share? Good. And
Yeah.
I'm really interested in a lot of the things that he's doing, and especially robotics as a service is just one. But anyway, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm not sure if you can see my slide deck. Okay.
Yes. Good.
We're seeing the wrong screen, David. We're seeing the presenter screen as opposed to the...
Okay, let me try this. How does that go?
That looks a lot better.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks.
Matt. Yeah, look, I mean, really some great presentations there. I really enjoyed listening to all of your thoughts about things. And, these are just some of my musings, and it's hardly as well articulated as the previous 2 presentations, but I'm just going to speak about the things that I've been through and the things that I know from my own perspective. And I think number one is, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. This is a very challenging situation. And, here's another twist on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think the key part is, maintaining your own individual well-being in the beginning. In this case, if you're at the bottom here and, you don't have any food, then, you're in trouble. Somebody once told me, that the reason on an airplane, when there's an issue and it says, first of all, put your oxygen mask on before you even begin thinking about helping somebody else, is because, you have to look after yourself first. So, that's point number one. No matter where you are, if you're running a business, you're in the middle of a business, you could be at the bottom of a food chain in the business, but whatever that is and whatever your circumstances are, first of all, just look after yourself, right? And that's body, mind, spirit, exercising, eating well, maintaining equilibrium. Because if you don't do those things, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually get yourself in and out of whatever thought patterns you're in. And, Einstein saying, that problems can't be solved at the same level of thinking with which they were created. You have to be able to create a space for you to be able to do something new and innovative. So that's the first thing. Secondly, look for sources of inspiration. So, whether you're going on your walk with your dog or what, these days, you can listen to podcasts, and, because what we listen to and what we fill our minds with absolutely impacts our thought processes and our thinking, right? So just thinking about Isaac Newton during his time forced away from Cambridge and at home because of the Black Plague, led to significant insights in universal gravitation and optics and so on and so forth. So, he called it his miracle years, right? But it's just a demonstration of, you're forced into a situation. What you do with it is all that matters, right? And we all have the same amount of time, right? People have said, don't run out. I've talked about different, ways of extending the runway and different things, but I always just say rule 101 of business and life in general is don't run out of cash, right? So whatever you have to do, if it's on a personal front, defraying mortgage or whatever, just keep your money so you can buy groceries and keep things going and those sort of things. And on the business side, it's the same, right? Just cash is the lifeblood of a company. So, cutting costs, using SBA loans, working with your bankers, but don't run out of money. And just what's clear is that some people win and some people lose under these circumstances, right? And you've got companies like Amazon. I mean, I'm sat up on the second level in my house and I watch every day the ins and outs of my subdivision, and I'm just amazed by how many Mercedes Amazon Prime vehicles that I see, which I didn't see 18 months ago, hardly ever. And it's just, how we respond to Uber Eats, these platforms we're using like Zoom or GoToMeeting, or where somebody is struggling, somebody's having a heyday, right? And we talked about JCPenney there going out of business too. So, what are some of the things that we're doing? I mean, new markets is key. And, there's that great book by Chan Kim and Renee Moborn on blue ocean strategies and staying in blue waters or moving to blue waters and staying out of red or shark infested waters, which are, there's a feeding frenzy going on. Go and find yourself some nice, clean ocean to go swim in, right? And so for our business, still a little myopically in oil and gas, we've pivoted internationally and use this as a springboard to move to Saudi Arabia. We're having discussions in other countries in the Middle East, but part of the plan there's weathering the storms of volatility which sweep through particularly US land and North America, and giving ourselves more option. If you look at the rig count reductions, for example, domestically to internationally, you're looking at, more than a 50%, 60% swing versus a 15% swing. So, the international markets are always better in terms of smoothing out the ups and downs. We've also looked at recently geothermal markets. We've looked at mining markets in terms of using elemental XRF machines that we have, which we're typically using in oil and gas applications, but looking at options for rare earth elements, options for using some of the tools that we have for geothermal logging. And I think the whole point is just be aware, right? Be on the lookout. Don't have a constrained vision, if you keep that that open-mindedness, then you will find things. Frankly, this whole pandemic thing was actually helped the international expansion strategy. In fact, I was supposed to be at Geo Bahrain at the Geo conference that was going on in March. It was cancelled because of COVID-19. I had several meetings lined up with key people from Aramco, and as a consequence, I said, "Do you mind if we do all these meetings on GoToMeeting or Zoom?" And they was sure. And the fact was, I got a lot more achieved without expending energy and going through time zone differences and all of the things that can be, resource draining, much faster. And so, that's my other message, is to just continue to look at new markets, and even within our oil and gas markets, we've seen a big difference between deep water and land. Deep water is a lot more robust, and so we've pivoted and moved some of our focus towards deep water. We recently just successfully picked a casing point, clearly identifying the tertiary Cretaceous boundary, which represented a massive pressure regression from like 16 pounds per gallon to 6. So it was critical to the well construction success of this project. And we did it all with, drill cuttings and XRF machines and micro paleontologists looking at micropaleo. And in fact, on this particular well, we had the LWD failed throughout the entire section, and then proceeded to fail in memory mode as well. And, today there's about $15 billion spent annually on LWD and wireline measurements. And a lot of it is, we run it because we just always have. And there's absolutely no reason why you should. What we're finding is that in today's market, people are more receptive to have conversations than they would have 3 months ago. Everything is on the table today. And crises force us into evolution at times. And so in that sense, what may appear to be a problem could well be your very best opportunity. For me, I'm very clear that we'll look back here, 3 to 6, probably more than 6 months from now, and think that this was probably the best thing that ever happened to us, because it forced us into doing things that we were prior to thinking about. But things were going well, and US land's going well, and we're picking up rigs, and everything's great, and we'll get round to international eventually, and it's not that big a deal. And I find that it just compresses the thought process, and it forces, in this case, me into a very focused objective, and what do I need to do to get that done in the shortest amount of time. And in that sense, these sort of situations can be a blessing in disguise, right? And the next step that we're working on is automation. In fact, my good friend Mark Mills has a very good book. I don't know if you see this, but it's work in the age of robots. Very well worth the read, and it's only about 90 pages. So if you have the attention span of a fruit fly, you can still get through it. And it's really interesting. And because robotics is going to be very much a large part of our future. And so in our space of drill cuttings, collection, and analysis is no difference. And we're grateful to have or we're sponsored by Shell's Global Game Changer Group to actually bring this to bear. And we're using a LIBS laser induced breakdown spectroscopy, which is the same technology they're using on the Mars rover project, and getting real-time elements and minerals analysis, which together with digital data, AI, drilling data integration, will allow our customers to significantly reduce the amount of downhole tool logging that they currently do, as I say, which represents about $15 billion annually. And do things with much lower risk and much higher efficiency in terms of cost effectiveness. And just to close out, is that it's really just opportunity, right? And this is a time that's a challenge, but it's also a time to reinvent. One of the things I've always wanted to do was to get my master's degree in geology, because I really ultimately would like to just be at a nice university and teach, and it's one of the minimum requirements to be able to do that. And so when we have our liquidity event here in the next 3 to 5 years, that's my plan. So I'm actually I got signed up at SFA, and I'll be starting my master's work. It's all online. Which is great, and certainly suits my my schedule to be able to work in the evenings and weekends and things. And so it's just another example, I think, of something I had in the back of my mind of things to do, but this situation allowed me to reassess and say, okay, I'm going to get on with that, and I'm going to do it, right? And so a message and hope for everyone on the call, because I'm assuming that people are looking for some ideas and thoughts, is that hopefully my words and thoughts here would be some sort of spark of inspiration or motivation or idea that now is the time to do the things that you've always wanted to do or thought about doing. And thank you.
Oh, that's great. I really enjoyed that. So this is wonderful, and want to thank each one of you for participating. I want to thank Larry Davis of Texas A&M Texarkana, Amy Henry of Eunike Ventures, Matt Bell of Strategic Peace, and Dave Tonner of Diversified Well Logging. And now we have an exciting time. I know there are at least 2 people in the audience who've come who are going to show some of or talk about some of their business ideas. I don't know to what degree, but I want to encourage that. So anyway, we have Dr. Munira Raji, and we also have Aaron. Are you still here, Aaron? Oh, I guess I don't see him.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, good. Aaron Lavin is here too. So who wants to go first?
I was scrolling down looking at the attendance, and I saw that Jeff there. I thought for a minute we had Tom Brokaw among us.
That's funny. Well, Aaron, do you want to go, or do you want to Munira? Munira's logging in from England. So.
Yeah, there's really not any major updates since last time, so I'll just sit on the back burner until everybody else is gone.
Okay. Munira, would you like to go?
Susan. My business plan is still a work in progress so far. Yeah, I'm coming up with I'm trying to come up with a business plan for robot as a service, just like David Turner just said. Mm-hmm. So it's still like a work in progress. I'm looking into cleaning services, delivery services. It's not as common as it's not as common here in the UK as it is in the US. So I'm trying to see how I can come in. And
Oh, that's good.
it's still a lot of work in progress. So yeah,
That's good.
I don't have a plan yet, but I'm still working on it. So thank you, Susan. Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Erin, you want to tell people what you're working on and share your camera and stuff? Oh, I'll make you a
Evening
co-host if you want
or
to.
afternoon to you around the world, or middle of the night, whatever. My name's Aaron Laubin. I'm a geologist, and I've been in the oil and gas industry for about the last 15 years. And when Susan did this, put out the ads for pivoting, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so in the first session, she started going through quite a few things. And what really sparked to me was her topics on 3D printing. I think that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people, but it's been around for quite a while. I've been into it as a hobby for about 10 years. So, you know, when she started saying, what did you notice that's missing out there? I just kind of said, hey, we're having a hard time finding 3D printer filament. And so Susan had asked if I wanted to put a proposal for a 3D filament factory together. So we started working on that and came up with some numbers. But as I was doing this week, the pricing schedule to kind of come up with a fair market value, every place I looked was out of the same stuff. So there's definitely a market, and especially on the PLA plastics. Those ones are just pretty tough to come by right now. I've been talking with a plastic distributor, and he's having problems getting it as well. So if anybody's looking at pivoting, maybe polylactic acid, it would be something to look at.
So you mentioned that that's corn-based. Do you know exactly where the factories are?
So the one factory that's pretty prominent here in the United States is called Nature Works. They're in, I think it's Blaine or Blair, Nebraska. They've got a couple different PLAs out there, and it's essentially, it looks like it's cornstarch with maybe a couple polymers and just heated up and made into pellets. So it's pretty big operation there. We've been looking at some of the, like what it would take to make that, and it's a pretty big operation, but there's definitely a market over the last 5 years. I mean, last week we looked at some of the growth charts, and we were looking at 20 to almost 30% growth in the industry over the next 5 years. So to me, if there's a problem right now on supplying it now, how are they going to supply everything in 5 years?
Well, that's true. And the other thing too, not just polymers in 3D printing, but metal and ceramics. I mean, those are so important, especially for dealing with any of the parts. And I don't know if anyone in the audience or if Matt or Amy or Dave or Larry would like to address any of those issues with 3D printing, but it'd be quite interesting.
I'm getting older, so I suffer from CRS, but I'll have to look up, because there actually is a very interesting 3D printing startup that's based out of Clear Lake. And they've been growing. I know Hess is doing trials and work with them. So are some of their majors. And so being that they also are a startup, it might be good and I believe they're ramping up to commercialization, to kind of connect with them, to get their thoughts on some of these materials. Because I would imagine as they scale up and commercialize, that's going to be very, very important with their business model. So I'll look up their name. I'll look up their name because I went to a pitch night downtown at the Cannon downtown.
Oh, okay.
And I spoke with them. So they're here in Houston. So they're very open. So I'll pull up the name and I'll send it to you.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be really great.
I think it might be Re3D.
It may be. I can't. Yeah,
That's
I
one
can't
of the
remember.
big guys in Clear Lake. RE:3D.
I'll have to. Yeah, it may be them. I just have to check.
I think 3D printing is really interesting because I think, you know, one of the things you see with a crisis like this is a lot of trends that were kind of gradually picking up speed suddenly get accelerated. So the trend of, you know, working remotely obviously suddenly got accelerated. Maybe some of it will slack back off, but we've taken a leap forward. Taking education from the campus to digital, that's obviously something that's changed dramatically. And I think the supply chain breakdown is going to take the locally manufactured to another level. So things that can be manufactured closer to the point of consumption, things that can be manufactured just in time and in one-off quantities. I mean, you think about a lot of the high-tech spare parts and things that we use, reconditioning oil field equipment. There's no reason for those to be fabricated in 10,000 part lots in China and then brought over and polished up and distributed. You can 3D print them now. And so I think the dawn of 3D, certainly 3D metal printing, and on the industrial side, we're right at it. I think it's going to happen now.
That's a good point. I was doing some investigating into the 3D metal printers here in the US. There are quite a few. And I mean, and they're printing such a wide array of things that you could go from any place to fittings or industrial metal to horse-shaped or cattle-shaped doorknobs for your house.
Now you can imagine new shapes too. So you can 3D print some things that are very, very difficult to machine, and especially uniformly. So actually at the moment, we're thinking about 3D printing things we already have, as opposed to how do I leverage 3D printing and really make stuff. I think the most interesting example I heard recently on a virtual talk about this was, what do you do when you lose a fork? So you have a set of 12 or 16 forks in your kitchen and you lose one, and it's really freaking annoying. And what you have to do is you have to order a fork, and sometimes you have to order 12 more, or sometimes somebody else orders 12 more and then sells you one for the price of 12, and then they sell the other 11 to somebody else. What you should be able to do is 3D print one fork, and there's nothing stopping you doing it, or the world doing it. It's just a matter of connecting the fork design to the 3D printer and the right materials. So I think that's a whole chapter of industry.
Well,
maybe that's industry 4.1, since 4.0 has already been taken.
And I liked what you were saying about there's no need to have a lot of 100,000 parts that they have to be polished up and distributed around. I mean, that happened before because of economies of scale, but between analytics and cloud-based platforms and agile operations, that totally redefines economies of scale.
Yeah, and if you've got 9,900 of those sitting in a warehouse right now, would you rather have that or the cash you spent on them and a 3D printer sitting on the desk?
Good point.
Inventory's bad.
Yeah.
Matt, one of the things that I was thinking about is the way that you were just bringing up is, say you've got a stove from 10 years ago and you need a knob for it. Well, you can buy a file for that particular knob, and then the next industry 4.1 would be you print it, it scans it, verifies that the part's made right, and then it charges you 50 cents or $1 for the file you just used.
I like that.
Yeah, we've also found that in the research and development phase that it really speeds the process of trying things out in the context of failing fast towards a solution. So we can try things quickly. Somebody will have an idea. It's kind of like draw it in the morning, print it in the afternoon, and try it the following day or that evening. And it works, doesn't work. Try this, tweak that, and it just accelerates that whole process, which would have taken much longer before.
That's great. So we've talked about production of items, we've talked about services, but like a lot of people in the oil industry, especially geologists, are really more knowledge workers. And so what do you do and how do you pivot if you're a knowledge worker? I mean, I can think of a few ways that all things have in common, workflows and analytics, but any thoughts on those, on that?
Yeah, I've got a thought. I mean, I think it was Matt that mentioned that most was relevancy, right? So it's really a question of trying to understand what people are needing right now, and you know, in some cases you have the skills already that meets that need, but perhaps you're just not presenting it in the appropriate way, or perhaps you need to upskill, in which case then, you know, do so as, you know, step one. And so yeah, I think that would be my suggestion. It's like really, you know, get an understanding of what areas people have a need for. So if it's digital transformation, can you take courses in data science or Python, or you know, how can I take my traditional well logging knowledge or petrophysics and turn it into, you know, something more, using different workflows, different processes, as you said, Susan. I do think a lot of it is about digital integration and making, joining the dots between what the subject matter expertise or knowledge that you possess and how it impacts the economics of the project. And if you can tie those things together, then, you know, that's what people are interested in, whether it's a service or a technology, a consultancy firm. It's all about, you know, how can you make it economically relevant?
I would say network, network, network. I mean, in Houston, you have the Pay It Forward network, which are energy professionals. They've been in existence for a while, started back with the last downturn. Some are currently in the energy industry, some are displaced, some have started their own businesses. It's well over 200 members. So, you know, it's a free organization. They meet virtually. So, you know, and we have a lot of geologists and explorationists in that organization. And they're very active. So there's no harm in just, you know, finding out what people have done, what they thought about. You've got to figure out kind of what there are things that will trigger ideas, right? But if you're not out meeting people, you know, hearing different perspectives, what they've tried, you know, you may not ever kind of get that idea or thought, right? It's kind of what you hear from someone else and then how you translate it based upon your experiences. And that's where some of the startups that we work with have got the most interesting stories, right?
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's a truth that we often forget. And Dave mentioned this too, that you keep yourself spiritually and emotionally together, and networking is good for that. And it's easy to just retreat and feel filled with a little bit of apprehension or confusion. And I'm going to introduce a few of our audience members. We've got Julie Lemaster and also Susan Morris, and they're spearheading. And Susan Morris has been putting together members in transition, and then we'll have the first in the Rockies, and there will be the first workshop tomorrow and talk. So Susan, would you like to talk a little bit about what members in transition is?
Hello, everybody. I'm just thinking when Amy was talking about Pay It Forward, in a way, it's the philosophy of people getting together and thinking, what can we do to make the lives of a lot of people who've been furloughed or displaced or whatever better. And in fact, Susan, you and I are speaking tomorrow at lunch on this subject, and this whole workshop this evening was great. In fact, I find myself wanting to ask you all a question, because I don't know which one might have a bit of direction, and it's nothing to do with the members in transition. Do you mind if I ask a totally separate question?
That'd be great. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I have a couple of friends in England, and during the lock-in, he has really rethought about an invention that his grandfather had written about many years ago. And it's basically a very, very clean, and I don't know all the details, new style combustion engine. And he just phoned the other day and he said, you know, I've been thinking about this. all of you have mentioned, the time to think about things that we want to do. And I was wondering, he thinks it would cost about maybe 50,000 to get a small model up and working to prove his grandfather's invention, and then take it into a pilot. Are any of you the sorts of people, I hear a touch of accents amongst you, but that I could put him in touch with for a bit of guidance?
I think I can tell you in Houston, besides the Pay It Forward Network, a focused, more organized group is the Global Energy Mentors Network. So these were all the mentors that had donated and worked with all the kind of early stage startups in Houston. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty large group. So, and it's free. They provide their advice free. Some still work and do kind of pro bono work on the side. I think, I would bounce some ideas and get some, free advice from people who've been in the industry to get their thoughts. And there's lots of, before you spend money, I would suggest that now that have the ecosystem in various areas have really been cropping up, and those are also free too as well. I know he's probably not Houston based, but but these are global organizations. You have Nash Challenge, we've got Generator, we've got many, many more. I would just get him to talk to some of these organizations that are more nonprofit, where he can get some advice before he starts to plop in his own capital, would be my advice. I think Matt will also probably have some good ideas as well.
So first of all, Susan, by all means, have him look me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find, and hopefully he's on LinkedIn. If he's not, get my email off LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to connect. But I would say, well, if he's in the UK, England or Scotland?
England.
Okay. So Scotland, the OGIC is pretty big, and you can get it with them pretty quickly. But yeah, there's a couple of people over there that I could easily connect him with. I think the first thing I'd say is, if it was thought of that long ago, do the patent search. Just see if somebody else has actually has commercialized something similar, because there's a lot of great ideas. I mean, maybe not. If not, then it could be something very interesting. There's obviously the Stirling engine and various other forms of high efficiency combustion engines out there. But yeah, happy to connect and try and point them towards some resources. There's several people just like us that are sort of seasoned energy industry consultants over there that I think would be happy to just do a little bit of a free chat just to see if there's anything there before you spend any money. Absolutely, don't spend money without at least talking to somebody about it.
Because it's at the other end of the spectrum. I'm a petroleum geologist, and so I suppose my gut feel is that they're onto something. And but your advice is exactly right. I haven't checked, for instance, the patents or anything like that. I bet he has, but those are a couple of steps, both networking. By the way, is it at all feasible to do a conceptual thing in 3D and try it out there?
Absolutely.
Is that Aaron? Who's that?
The Fusion 360's Autodesk product, you can get it for free, and it does thermal modeling, stress modeling, and then if it makes something big, he's going to have to pay up.
Yeah. Okay.
Another place you can go is universities. So, there's always grad students looking for things to build projects around. So you'll be a little bit careful giving your idea away, and they tend to be very slow. But if you're not in a hurry, it's a good resource to use.
Yeah.
There is a startup. If this is the UK, I would look them up. It's Petrocad, and they're on version 2, and they do 4D CAD and modeling. So they had the first startup. They were successful. I think Baker Hughes bought them. We've worked with them, but they're based in the UK. You might want to reach out to them as well, and I can send you their name.
Yeah.
Oh, these are great.
Susan, thank you very much, because you introduced me, because of our networking and everything, which is terribly important, but it actually shows how immediately active and in action that these groups can be. And I think the fact that we're all virtual means that we can help each other around the world. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Oh, thank you. And thanks, Matt, for sharing in the chat, the Petrocad link. That's great for 3D and 4D modeling.
And Susan, I'd be more than happy to take a call from him as well. I think there's been some really good ideas. I can tell him my experience. I can tell him about the Shell Game Changer project, which could be a source of funding that he could look into. And anyway, I'd be happy to help.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yep.
Nice. So Julia Lemasters has just put together a resource called Petroleum Pivoters. Would you like to talk about it, Julia?
Sure, give me 1 second.
Okay, great. Julie's done a lot of work on that. Oh, great.
So Susan Morris actually invited me in last month into a group was put together by AAPG, SPE, and then the Rocky Mountain Association of Geologists. So we've been meeting weekly, and as Susan alluded to, they're having their first webinar tomorrow. But out of that, I actually started putting together a website to centralize resources for job seekers, specifically focused on geologists and engineers who have been laid off or found themselves unemployed, like myself, because of, I guess you could call it the Black Swan event of 2020. I was getting overwhelmed by all the resources online. So it has a lot of stuff out there for either how to pivot within the industry or pivot to a different industry. Mm-hmm. We're adding more content every single week. And then the thing that I've really done is put a calendar on there for all sorts of these virtual events that are going on. Because I think today there were like 6 of them, and tomorrow there's like 5 that I ran across. And so I'm starting to aggregate all those into one spot for everyone, because it was just getting too much to try to keep track of all these webinars and Zooms.
What happens to me is I find out about it after it's over, and then there's not a recording. So
yes. Yeah.
This is great. Well, thank you, Julia, and so much appreciated. And just on the theme of networking, I think the main thing is we just really need to keep in mind that there are resources, and then just always talking to each other and looking at things from fresh eyes to kind of overcome our cognitive biases. I'm always interested in how the visual, like the limbic system, the fight or flight, is triggered by visual, and it often overwhelms the frontal cortex and the rational part. And this is happening over and over. So sometimes we have to like step away from the news feed or step away and talk to an independent third party to get some bearings and get our kind of feet back under us. So Larry, would you like to comment at all? Larry, you're muted. Well, I guess maybe not. Larry? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Unmute and unmute.
Okay.
No, I'm just sitting back enjoying the comments. I guess this is the 3rd week of your get-togethers, and they keep getting better and better. And it's been an excellent night.
Well, thank you. Well, so we'll share the resources, and just want to thank everyone for being in a part of this. I want to thank our attendees, and again our speakers, Larry Davis, Amy Henry, Matt Bell, and David Tonner. And also just to let you know that this is sponsored by AAPG and also Tulsa Geological Society, and that AAPG has resources available. So if you are interested in what we have, just email me, contact me, and just want to thank you again.
Well, thank you for having us, Susan. Yeah, I love the pitch that you put on, and enthusiasm that you kind of bring to the entrepreneur and startups and technology. So, I mean, I just quickly, as I was looking here at the screen, you never realize how small your world is. And network, I see someone that I worked with in The Hague, Essie. He was an economist when we worked together on Nigeria LNG.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was back in 2005. And I'm seeing him there, and now I'm connecting with him again.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing.
you know, it's just amazing. So I think, you know, I would utilize this time, you know, to reach out to even people who worked with 15, 20 years ago. I find people are being very, very receptive. So, you know, don't be shy. That would be my advice.
Here, here.
Wonderful.
Susan,
Yes.
question. Is this a weekly workshop, or is it just is this the last one?
Well, I think we'll do another one next week. There's
Oh,
been a lot of
fantastic.
interest in it. I talked to Sean Ebert of Altira Group and a few other people I'm talking with. So I think we'll have another one. We could take it another step. If people are interested in doing it, I'll send out information.
Can we get someone to talk about drones next time, maybe?
Talk about drones? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, we'll get some drones. Yeah, that would be good. I know quite a few people in that space.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again. I guess I'll turn off the recording.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. Really appreciate the discussion. It's great.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.